Many thanks for staying with us. The National Economic Council has recommended that President Bola Tinubu withdraw the tax reform bills currently before the National Assembly to allow for broader consultations. Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde announced the Council's resolution on Thursday after the 144th NEC meeting held at the State House in Abuja. Speaking to journalists, Makinde explained that members agreed more time was needed to build consensus and deepen public understanding of proposed reforms. The Council's recommendation follows the recent endorsement of the tax bills by President Tinubu and the Federal Executive Council. The federal government promoted the reforms as a means to improve efficiency and reduce redundancies within Nigeria's tax systems. And now joining us to discuss this is a business and social policy analyst, Kenneth Ikenwa. Thank you so much, Mr. Ikenwa, for joining us.
Good evening, Laura. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right, you're welcome. So let me start by asking, which of the contentious issues by the Northern Governors Forum in Nigeria would you say is most alarming for you, looking at the rejection of the bill from them as regards their reservation?
Well, like the saying goes, the goldfish doesn't have a hiding place in any aquarium. Could hide behind a couple of waters, but definitely we found out. Back to your question, the most intriguing and alarming, quite eccentric and bizarre aspect of the bill, which a particular segment of the country is complaining about, and which they have that right to complain about, is the fact that, well, the bill addresses a new restructuring of the VAT administration, which administration and derivation, which means that VAT will actually be distributed according to where companies who produce certain products actually have their headquarters domiciled. Well, if you ask me, I think that quite is an unfair provision in that reform, in that bill, because when groundnuts were being produced in the north in the 60s, nobody actually domiciled those things. Those things and the revenue actually got to the center and was used to develop other parts of the country. And the same thing for oil. So when oil was being produced and is being produced in Niger Delta, we're not saying it must sit in Niger Delta. We take it to develop in other parts of the country. But it addresses, again, the issue of our economic structure and the extent to which there's equity, there's fairness, there's egalitarianism, and there's distributive justice when it comes to actually, people actually looking at revenue mobilization, revenue allocation formulas, and actually saying to yourself, if people actually produce a particular thing in a particular area, shouldn't they get more? So I think the bill can be overhauled to favor maybe more productive areas. And rather than having an all-condemning view about the bill, I think it should give the opportunity for other parts and other segments, other subnationals within the Confederation to actually sit up, attract foreign direct investment and foreign portfolio investments into their territories and become more productive. So it's a pari passu thing. For positive, yeah, there's a positive angle to this complaint, and there is a negative angle to this complaint that addresses the issue of equity, going back to our trajectory as a country since the 60s, when we put ourselves together and have a collective pulse for revenue.
Yeah, but then if you weight on a scale, would you say that the tax bills is actually, one that would hinder Nigeria's economic growth or that will foster it more? If we were to weigh which one would, if we were to weigh it in terms of if it would be advantageous or disadvantageous?
Well, it's important that we draw parallel lines between and differentiate between what we call economic growth and economic development. In terms of growth, I don't see any way that stopping or hindering the implementation of the tax reform bill for now will hinder economic growth. It will not hinder the per capita income growth. The only thing that can actually hinder that is fiscal irresponsibility and the lack of strategic planning, futuristic planning to actually plan and to actually, project for income and ensure that all hands are on the deck to make the economy more productive. But what that bill could actually hinder is actually, in the true sense of the word, economic development. And that will mean that rather than have people sit down to start thinking of how they themselves can, begin to contribute to the tax rate of the country and get something back to their subnationals or to their territories, they will begin to rely on the collective purse. And that in itself stifles initiatives, stifles innovation, stifles creativity. So when you look at it, weighing it by differentiating between what we call economic growth, which has to do with per capita increase over time, and economic development, which has to do with, changes and modifications in the lives of the people, having new structures, having factories on ground that promote indirectly economic growth and income growth for people, definitely a bill of this nature and the unnecessary contentions, which are quite cancerous, that it is causing and bringing about, will definitely be hindering economic development going forward. The question we should address is whether this will be in the short term or this will be in the long term. But I think in the long term, it is dangerous. And I think in the short term, it is to an extent quite dangerous if these issues are not addressed.
Okay, so you're saying there's a possibility that it probably might be dangerous when you look at the short term, I want to believe. And we know that Nigeria is aiming to attract more foreign direct investment. So when you look at the suspension of this tax bill now, does it send a mixed signal to international investors as regards, Nigeria's tax regime, Nigeria's tax inconsistencies, because people want to definitely do business with Nigeria, but then if they are not so clear as regards how and when or to whom they pay tax or in what guise or form these taxes would be paid, they probably might feel, probably subjected to some kind of economic inconsistencies, and that might deter them.
Well, that may not be the subject matter. That may not be the true picture. For now, if we look at it from the helicopter point of view, it would look as though it could hinder the attraction of foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investments. But I think the major concerns of countries or of companies that may be coming into the country is the fact that they have to grapple with a multiplex of taxes. I call it a multiplex of taxes, not even just multiple taxation, multiplex of taxes that actually hinder their operations. And so the suspension of the bill or the implementation of the bill will not in any way, in my view, contribute to the multiplier effect of either stifling attracting foreign direct investment or stifling, the inflow and the outflow of either FDIs or FPIs. But what we should actually be focusing on is how we can actually create a tax incentivized environment that will not only stimulate economic growth and development, attract foreign direct investment, attract organic indigenous investments, but this incentivized tax system, administration system, will promote, the flow of capital within the country, promote the accumulation of capital, and we can domicile manufacturing, domicile the growth of the real sector in Nigeria instead of funding growth of the real sectors of other economies and other countries outside Nigeria. So we must
the Nigerian government is trying to improve its fiscal. Kenneth, the Nigerian government is trying to improve its fiscal purse by, improving on its tax regime, whereby it can rake in more money. Basically, we're talking about revenue mobilization when we talk about expenditure and all that. So if we incentivize the tax administration, the possibility of the Nigerian government losing money, it's there. So what are the gains, or how do we balance this?
The Nigerian government will not be losing money if we have a more incentivized tax environment. The Nigerian government will be making more. There will be more productivity. There will be more willingness on the part of investors, on the part of Nigerians to actually deploy their resources and contribute to the economic growth, contribute to economic activities in the country. All right. So if that can be put in place, you will find out that there will be more productivity will lead to more generation of revenue, and more generation of revenue will lead to more generation of taxes for the federal government. Now, the clear issue here is the issue of instability. The clear issue here is the issue of the trust deficit. And when there's a trust deficit around the tax administration system, around the tax implementation system, what happens? The companies, corporate citizens, individual citizens begin to look for leakages in the system with which they can actually engage or indulge in tax evasion. So we have a bigger problem on our hands. We have a tax system that indulges tax evasion, that makes taxation look like a burden rather than a blessing on the going concern and the enterprise called Nigeria and the people in Nigeria, as it were. So if we can reshape, if we can reinvent, if we can rejig that taxes, bring the incentives, give people the motivation to be more productive, and the motivation that comes from the sincerity of actually handling these taxes and the tax revenue properly, it will have a positive multiplier effect for the country going forward, and the government will actually be smiling.
Well,
so
I guess that's why
away from tax, we must address the issue of the trust deficit that has to do with the tax administration system.
Yeah, I guess that's why, the Nigerian government is trying to digitize the tax regime in the country. But then, Kenneth Ikenwa, thank you so much for sharing your profound thoughts with us. We appreciate that.
My pleasure.